Those Ventures, and today we're doing another episode of a Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. And today we've got a bit of a mixture of things. We've got OG Bear with a few Pterosaur edits that we're going to look through. We've got the Mollusk pack by Jura that we're going to take a look through a few of those. And we've got one really cool animal at the end. You saw it on the thumbnail. We'll be having a look at the end by LA Studios, who really does a wonderful job. So we're going to be starting off today with OGB's edits. So these three, the Dimorphodon, Tropicus and Pteranodon, all done by OG Bear. And we're going to be starting off with the Dimorphodon. So you see the Dimorphodons. So really, really wonderful animals. Let's see if we can get one in a good light, but it's kind of hard. Oh, look at this one. So this is Dimorphodon. Dimorphodon macronix, if you say that, which means kind of double-toothed or two-type teeth with big claws. That's what its name means. So we're going to have a look at some of the changes here. We can see the changes, the main big changes to that skull there. As I mentioned, Dimorphodon means two types of teeth. So they did have these two teeth. The long upper jaw teeth had cutting surfaces, with the lower jaw having slightly shorter teeth, which allowed them to hunt all sorts of things. They're originally interpreted as a fish eater, like most pterosaurs, but now they're kind of considered very much similar to like birds, even like some species of bats, like the New Zealand lesser short-tailed bat, which feeds all sorts of different invertebrates and small animals, like small reptiles, amphibians, those kind of things. And it's pretty good on the ground as well as flying, so potentially could have flew down and then there's looking nooks and crannies for prey, things like that. But we can see some changes here, especially from that just T-Rex looking Dimorphodon from the movies. We can see it's got a very rounded, like semicircular head, big round. I like the big box as well. You can see the different teeth. Really like the coloring as well. I like the pattern. And then we can move to the necks and things here. So we can see the wing, pretty nice. It probably rounded out a little bit more, but still looks really nice. And I would say one of the couple of things to change as well, it needs a small patagium or small skin flap that goes down here, considering that's kind of what we most likely see. And then we got this really long tail that a lot of these earlier pterosaurs had, specifically like Rhamphorhynchids and Dimorphodons and things like that. They had, not Dimorphodons, Dimorphodon, yeah, right one. I was thinking Dimetrodon, but it's the wrong one. But yeah, they've got these long tails, and then eventually later ones like the later pterodactyloids, and even like Astarchids, things like that. As late in the future, they lost that tail. But you can see, because these guys are so early, Dimorphodon's from the early Jurassic, so they had that. But in terms of what's wrong, I'd just say like that extra little skin flap there. I think it's called the Europatagium. Also rounding out those wings just a little bit more. And one thing I always mention is that pycnofibers, and I'll go through it just so I don't have to go through it a dozen more times, go through each animal, but pycnofibers are kind of filaments, very similar to feathers or fur, that pterosaurs had, and there has been some research considering that they got to like stage 3 feathers, or analogous to or similar to, so they would have had like lots of branching bits coming off of them. Though some research and some people think that potentially that pycnofibers could be just feathers, and that feathers are ancestral to dinosaurs and pterosaurs, and ancestral to a group called Ornithodira, which includes both pterosaurs and dinosaurs. And then lots of animals could have lost them independently, like sauropods, Tyrannosaurus maybe, ankylosaurs and stegosaurs. They may have lost their feathers as they kind of got bigger. But it's kind of which the chicken or the egg. It either could be they evolved multiple times, similar structures evolved multiple times, or they lost it multiple times. It's kind of either one is equally valid, but still cool regardless. So OGB, I think, did a really great job with that one. So we're going to be moving on to the next one. We have got going to a bigger one. Oh, that's not you we want to talk about. We have got Tropicus. That's a really, really nice one. So Tropicnathus is a very interesting one. It's actually one of the larger pterosaurs, second only to kind of like the giant Astarchids like Quetzalcoatlus, Hexagopteryx, and its relatives. But these guys were very large with an 8 meter wingspan or so, and we can start with some of the changes. Most of the changes are particularly to the face. You can see that really big semicircular crest that it's got going on. So the newest specimen is kind of a very large one, and it has the mandible and things like that. The skull of the individual itself is about 1 meter long, and it has a much deeper rear margin of the crest, and that wingspan of this big individual is about 8 meters, which makes it pretty much larger than most other pterosaurs, except for those really, really big extarchids. But we can see some of the changes here, especially that round semicircular crest. We know that they had this kind of semicircular crest that kind of goes up like that and extends to the lower jaw as well, so it kind of like rounds it up a bit. They didn't have a big crest on the back of their head there like Pteranodon or something like that. We know that pretty much what that looked like. Let's see if we can find the other one. Is the other one around here? He must have flown away. Oh, there he is. Oh, that's a nice color. You can see that there, really, really nice. And they've also got this big long head. They were very much adapted for eating fish. These guys probably spend a lot of time in the ocean with an ecology very similar to modern albatrosses. But we can have a look at the wings there. Wings are not too bad. I quite like this. Looks really, really nice. Probably round it still a bit more and maybe extend that membrane of the wing a little bit down here. And of course, pycnofibers, pycnofibers, pycnofibers. That's something I keep mentioning. All pterosaurs most likely had pycnofibers. And these guys are from the South America, so these guys lived about 110 million years ago in the early Cretaceous, where South America and Africa were just starting to split off from each other. And this area would have been with lots of lakes and things, and would have been the splintering of the Atlantic Ocean. And Tropicnathus was hunting in lake and marine waters as well. And actually believed that these semicircular crests could have actually helped stabilize their snouts when dipping into water, similar like a keel on a boat, but it could help for diving or potentially be for sexual displays. But these guys are quite similar to, if you guys know Walking with Dinosaurs, that giant ornithochirus is actually a Tropicnathus. But they seem to not be that distantly related and was distantly related and split into different species. So Ornithochirus and Tropicnathus are very different. And this comes from the Santana Formation, which is a formation in Brazil or in South America that has all sorts of really interesting pterosaurs. In fact, most of the pterosaurs from the game actually come from Santana Formation. I've already kind of gone through that with other paleoedits, like Furlong's paleoedits and things like that. I've kind of gone through them. But really, really cool regardless. Definitely a big fan. So we're going to let you fly off and do your thing. And then we've got here next Pteranodon. Jurassic World Pteranodon. Also done by OG Bear. We have got one of their edits. So I have to say this one is extremely beautiful. But we'll let Dr. Dua, we'll let her talk and then move over that. But we'll have a look at this wonderful guy here. So this is OG Bear's the Pteranodon. So you can see some of the wonderful changes. You can see that head looks so much better, not quite so sunken in eyes, and that big upturned crest. Bill, you can kind of see that there. And there is some sexual dimorphism. This looks like very much a male. So females had much smaller crests, and males had these much larger crests on the back here. So this definitely looks like a male. All the ones in Jurassic Park are kind of females, you could say, especially in Jurassic World. So that's why they have such small crests. But you can see these lovely colors here. I love it. I love that upturned beak. Makes it look so much nicer. Love that red throat. It reminds me of frigate birds. Really, really awesome. And if we have a look at their wings, the wings are definitely greatly improved. These guys were very much open ocean. They kind of lived over shallow seas. The Western and Interior Seaway is where often you find them, and like around the Niobrara Formation, which would have been in the Western Interior Seaway during the late Cretaceous. So they would have lived in that kind of habitat. Ecology very similar to most seabirds, like albatrosses and things like that, mollymawks, where they would have been gliding over oceans and diving or potentially looking for prey on that, even sitting on the water. And they would have had these long wings to be able to help glide. You can see that. Probably could be a little bit more rounded, but still looks really, really nice. Definitely a big fan. Also, the membrane could be extended about down here probably, and even extended to parts of the tail. But I do love the colors. I like the red and greens. It's really stark coloring, and I really do like it. So quite nice. So yeah, really you can see all those changes make it so much better and just looks so much nicer design than the Jurassic World one. OG Bear, I love the edits, but the one thing I've got to say is Pycnofibers, 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 and I don't want to go over it again and again and again. Just say it needs Pycnofibers. Pretty much all pterosaurs most likely had Pycnofibers. But yeah, look at these really beautiful models. I still think they're very pretty regardless. I think they've done a really wonderful job. So we're going to let them fly off and do their thing. So, after hearing Dr. Doer's wonderful commentary, which we didn't really need to hear, we're going to be moving on now. We have got the Mollusk pack by Jasurba. I've got 5 out of the 7. The other 2, because I've already covered them before, technically, they'll be in the next episode. But we've got all cool new species of cephalopods. So that includes nautiloids, ammonites, belemnites, octopus, and cuttlefish and squid. So very, very awesome. So we're going to be starting off today with Belalictus, I believe you say that. So let's open up. So let you swim out and do your thing. I want to make sure you get a good image in the light so you can see these wonderful guys here. So this is... Belanictus, if you say that, which means walking stick rock. So these guys are an extinct group of cephalopods, which means head foot. That includes octopuses, cuttlefish, ammonites, things like that. They're a type of ammonite, the heteromorph ammonite, and they lived worldwide during the late Cretaceous period and actually briefly survived the KPT mass extinction, so lived a little bit after the death of the dinosaurs, but seemed to do okay. But the adult shell of these guys are typically straight, and they may either be smooth or with striata or ribbing down the side there. The juvenile shell is actually found to be coil or 1 or 2 whorls, and they're about a centimeter long. But adults can get up to about, because there's many different species, adults can get to about 7 centimeters, or about 2.8 inches, or the largest species, or Belanictes larsoni, gets up to about 2 meters, or about 6'6" in length. And like as with other ammonites, these guys have lots of chambers, or chamberae, so chambers within the shell that are connected via a spiracle. So it allows them to control the amount of gas in their shell to control their buoyancy, so they can move up and down the water column. And really interesting. Including the shell morphology, they have this like more rounded keel, and some species kind of, as you can see, has that kind of twig to it. Some of them are more straight and things like that. So that's really, really interesting. And this same type of cross section is actually found in lots of nautiloids from the Ordovicians, so way in the Paleozoic. So it seems that these guys may have kind of convergently evolved that kind of position where these guys would have been head straight down and kind of, it's not like this, but more straight up in the air, so they would have been hanging down like that and potentially going up and down the water column. Great example of convergent evolution. So they would have been much more horizontal, much more vertical, depending on subspecies. On the species, some would be more horizontal, some would be more vertical, depending on the species. In terms of its ecology, these guys, isotopes, it seems these guys were kind of in the middle part of the water column, so they weren't too close to the surface of the ocean and they weren't too close to depths. So these guys seem to be quite common and may have lived in quite large shoals, and they actually seemed to occur densely in rock-forming areas. So they're not known to occur like that, like ornithocones. And studies suggest that these guys actually have a radula, so very similar to snails and things. They have a radula. It's like a giant tongue with like teeth on it that they use to eat things. And it seems that these guys may have fed on pelagic zooplankton, and as suggested by a larval gastropod and a pelagic isopod found in their mouth. So these guys were pretty much filter feeders. And these guys in these related Cretaceous straight ammonites actually have a lot of convergence and often confused with ornithocone nautiloids, cephalopods, which are from the Paleozoic. So back in like the Ordovician Silurian, places like that. But that just seems to be convergent evolution as they kind of evolved this tubular shape. And it seems like these guys may have been like much more similar to ammonites. Their ancestors would have had those round keeled shells that we know, and then kind of like just rolled out and kind of took that shape, which is quite interesting. But there is a few different species. And they're often used sometimes as like index fossils. So they're used to find out what time you're in, because you can use different species of certain things. It's called biostratigraphy. So if you know a certain species that is in a certain area, that's a certain time, which is quite interesting. And in terms of cultural significance, they're the most common, quite commonly broken fossils, but people do like to collect them. There, people have, especially like Native American groups, have even had referred to them as stone buffaloes, things like that. But yeah, really, really cool. Nice to see some cephalopods. They get to talk about some things, and even I learned some things because I'm not too well versed in cephalopods, but really, really cool. So we're going to let them swim off and do their thing. Jasuba really did a wonderful job. So next up, let's have a look. Next up, we've got Psittacarus, or Pterosaurus, I believe you say that. Let me open that up. So let's get you guys in the light. There you are. So this is, as I mentioned, Psittacarus, which means the type species is Psittacarus endometrium, and there's two species. It's like Tremanchi and Borealfi and Intermedium as well. So these guys are an extinct genus within the cephalopod mollusk family. They're a type of nautilus. They're part of the superfamily Nautilidae, so they are a type of nautilus. These guys, notonic carnivores, so they'd be feeding, filter feeding, so feeding on very small things like zooplankton. Shells from these guys are quite variable in form, and actually depends on the species, ranging from elavote to inlavote. They also have like rounded venter and flanks and things like that, and they have a spherical. And very similar to other species of ammonites, they have those chambers in their shell that allow them to control their buoyancy, so they can abound in gases, things like that, which is quite interesting. Really, really cool animal. And these guys are a little bit more varied in their range. These guys are a little bit earlier in time than our last ammonoid. These guys are from the upper Jurassic to the middle Jurassic, so about 230 to 160 million years ago. That's where you typically find them, and they're found pretty much across the world. They can be found in some in Madagascar, just pretty much everywhere. But yeah, really, really cool animal. I do love these guys. And yeah, really, really cute. I do love this model as well. Very does much look like a nautiloid. Really, really cool. Another great one from Jasuba. So let them swim off and do their thing. Next up, we've got Nectocarus. Let's see if we let them swim around. Sorry for any technical difficulties, but let's see if we can get one in a open water so we can take a good look at you. There we are. Look at this little cutie. So here is Nectocarus, a really, really cute little guy. So very interesting. These guys are from way, way before any of they're quite in the beginning of the Paleozoic. So these guys are from the Cambrian period. And they're a squid-like animal, but we really don't know their relationships. But the initial fossils have been found in the Burgess Shales in Canada, so that's famous for animals like Anomalocaris and Hallucigenia. But they've also been found in Emu Bay Shale at Australia and the Xinjiang biota of China, so very interesting. So these guys were free-swimming, predatory or scavenging organisms, with their lifestyle kind of reflected in their binomial name, which is Nectocarus, which means the swimming shrimp. And there's kind of two morphs that you can find. There's a small morph that's about 1 inch long, and then there's a large morph that is like identical anatomically, but about 4 times bigger. So you can see there they've got this like flattened keel with that fleshy fin. Very superficially, at least, looks like a... probably can't get much closer than that. Very much looks superficially like a squid. But instead of having those 8 long tentacles, they just have 2. and they have a flexible tunnel shape coming out their body, which seems to be very much like a siphon or a kind of almost like a funnel, which is quite interesting. And they have a long cavity that runs down their body, and the bodies, we've found that they have gills and they have muscle blocks as well, which is really, really interesting. And although, as I mentioned, Nidocaris is found from China, Canada, and Australia, the rocks that span about 20 million years, they actually do not seem to change much, even though the size changes a bit. They typically are very much anatomically very similar, and historically about 3 genera have been erected, but they were all lumped into Nidocaris and Pteryx. And there's two distinct morphs, as I mentioned. There's one large morph that's about 10 centimeters in length, and a smaller one that's about 3. And it's believed that these guys could potentially be sexually dimorphic, with females or males being larger for different reasons. But still really, really cool regardless. And the unusual shape of this funnel has actually led to the interpretation that these guys may have had a proboscis, or even that could have been a funnel very similar to modern squids or nautiloids. And they also were thought to be previously free-swimming neotenic organisms, but either scavenged on or predated on soft-bodied animals, and they use their tentacles to kind of manipulate their food. And as I mentioned, these guys are quite hard to place in the family tree of animals. Their affinities are quite controversial. Some people suggest that they're highly derived early cephalopods, so more related to things like, of course, like squids, cuttlefish, things like that. However, some authors have suggested that they cannot really be put in these groups, so they kind of thought they even be their own independent lineage, and they just convergently evolved to look like kind of like an octopus or a cuttlefish, which is quite interesting. And that just shows how awesome the Cambrian biota is. I really wish I could talk about it more, because the Cambrian biota really fascinates me. It's like where life truly started to look recognizable to today, which is so cool. Even Ediacaran as well. I love Ediacaran stuff. But there's been a lot of history and study. People have been trying to find that these guys, there's even some people suggested they had a notochord, and lots of people have been studying this guy to try and figure out where it fits in relation to modern animals and fits within the tree of life. And there's been some other animals up to it. There's Vetsomerus, which means very old worm, which was now considered a junior synonym of Nectocaris, that was found in Emu Bay in Australia. And Petalterum, which is one from China, has also been lumped into Nectocaris. And they are quite similar to each other. And the large specimen kind of comes from this fibre. They all come from, they look quite similar to each other, but really, really cool. Really do love these guys. Really teaches us a lot. So let's let them swim off and do their thing. Next up, we've got another cool one. We've got Paleoctopus, also done by Jura. So this is Paleoctopus newsboldi. Very, very interesting animal. Let's see if we can get ourselves, have a good look at you. So Paleoctopus newsboldi, these guys are basal octopod, so kind of related to octopuses. These guys lived in the late Cretaceous, so we've gone from pretty much the Cambrian to the late Cretaceous. That's a big chunk of time. These guys lived approximately about 89 to about 71 million years ago. And there's been fossils found in Lebanon, typically where it's found. And the holotype is actually found in Mount Lebanon and is now in the Natural History Museum in London. And it's believed to belong to the Sonera and actually basal to the Octopoda, so it's related to octopus. And there's been specimens been found from Mexico as well, described as a species P. pelagnus, or reinterpreted to portions of a coelacanth. So this is a really interesting animal because they're soft-bodied, they don't often get preserved. But this tells us a lot about the evolution. We can see that it's starting to become an octopus. You can see it's starting to lose that big mantle, starting to round out a bit, and losing those fins. But yeah, it still looks really, really cool. Definitely a big fan. And really, really awesome. So we're going to let you swim off and do your thing. And last but most certainly not least, we have got another really cool animal here. We've got Prospinia, or as you say that, Prospinia. So let's have a look at you. There we are. So these wonderful little guys, these are, as I mentioned, called Prospinia, I believe you say that. We'll have a look at you since you're probably the best positioned one. These guys are a fossil organism of really unknown affinity, but it was, even though it was originally interpreted as a extinct cephalopod, later studies kind of disputed. It's known from a single well-preserved fossil that comes from the late Carboniferous, Francis Creek Shale, from the northeast Illinois in the United States. And the species name is Prospinia mazonensis, and was described by James Pohl in the type locality Moses Creek was habitat. And at the time, this was shallows. This was kind of a river delta, but was it in an ocean between the Midwests and the Alapatians. And it's actually once considered to be the oldest known octopus, but now is considered quite dubious. And even in 2020, it's even showed it may not even be a mollusk. So this is kind of a weird pick for the pack, but this is based on an old interpretation. So the fossil itself is about 3.5 centimeters long, or about 1.4 inches, and has a sac shape and poorly defined head. Though it's unclear, it could be features of an ink sac as well. And the fossil lacks arm hooks or suckers, which actually combine to make people don't really think it could even be an octopus or related closely at all. And in 2000, there's people been really trying to figure out its relations. And most recently, it was considered even unlikely to be a mollusk or a cephalopod, with a lack of shell being highly unlikely in combination in a carboniferous cephalopod, with no beak or radula or ink sac or anything like that. It's even been suggested that these guys could be more similar to chidarians, which includes jellyfish and sea anemones, so they could be it could be a freshwater jellyfish or a freshwater anemone of some kind, or something we just completely don't know about, because this is 300 million years ago. There's a lot of things that were weird at the time. And the locality is Mason Creek, as I mentioned, in Illinois. And most of those fossils have actually been found in a carbon film. And it seems that these organisms were basically buried during bursts of water, and the remains were protected from most decomposition before it could start. And these storms would actually surge organisms that would be submerged in sediments and create an environment that was actually very well protected for fossils. So that's really good. And it was currently the holotype, or the only fossil found of Prospinia mazonensis, is currently located in Chicago, Illinois, in the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. And it's actually located only 80 miles from its discovery, and is one of the largest natural history museums in the world. And there's also other really interesting invertebrate fossils that comes from Mason Creek that includes millipedes, cockroaches, brittleworms, ribbonworms, and spoonworms. So a very interesting and biodiverse place. So that's really, really cool. So yeah, really, really awesome. So last and definitely not least, we've got a very interesting dinosaur here today by LA Studios. We have got Mapusaurus. So this is a dinosaur I haven't got to cover in a while, but we'll have a look at anyway. So really, really cool animal. Do love Mapusaurus. So Mapusaurus is a giant Carcharodontosaurid dinosaur from the late Cretaceous, from the early Tenorian stage, and lived about 93.9 to about 89.6 million years ago of what is now Argentina. So Mapusaurus was first discovered between 1997 and 2001, and was found in the Hunsul Formation, the same formation as Argentinosaurus, and was described by Rafaldo Conera and Phil Curry in 2006. And the name Mapusaurus is derived from the Mapuche word mapu, which means of the land or of the earth, and saurus in Greek, which means lizard. So it's basically lizard of the earth or lizard of the land, which is quite a cool name. And Rosier is kind of this type species name. It comes from the rose-covered rocks that it was founded. And there have been some holotypes, but 12 paratypes have been found as well. We actually know quite a lot about Mapusaurus as how it grew, which is really interesting. So Mapusaurus is a large theropod, but it's slightly smaller than its close relative Giganotosaurus, and measured about 11 to 12 meters, or about 36 to 40 feet, and weighed over 5 metric tons, or about 5.1 short tons. And there's a few unique traits to it as well, and it really only differs from Giganotosaurus by lacking a second opening on the quadrate and some other things. But the fossil remains of Mapusaurus was discovered in a bone bed that contained 7 to 9 individuals of various growth stages, so basically from young to adults. And it's actually been suggested that this could be a long-term, possible coincidental accumulation of carcasses, though like a predator trap. But another and potentially more interesting interpretation, and also true, which makes sense because it's just Mapusaurus in this bone bed, really, that it could mean that they could be more social. And there's other evidence to support this in other dinosaurs. So there are bone beds of kind of one species of different ages of large theropods. There's also some in America that includes the Allosaurus-dominated Cleveland Lloyd dinosaur quarry. There's an Abeltosaurus bone bed in Alberta and a Displetosaurus bone bed in Montana that have individuals of different ages together. And even there's potentially a Tyrannosaurus bone bed in Montana as well. So that could mean larger theropods could potentially be social in some kind. So maybe a mother or a breeding pair and their babies, so living in kind of a family group. Of course, it's very hard to tell that from fossils, but it's still a very likely interpretation. And I think it also kind of helps dispel the big mean dinosaur, like big hunting alone. Lots of predators today do live in family groups. So obviously wolves, dolls, things like that, lions. So that's a great example, which is quite cool. But again, it's also controversial. It's believed that they may be hunted in groups or work together to hunt bigger animals like Argentinosaurus, which lives in its habitat. And there have been suggested they could hunt in packs, but there's really no evidence to support that in the fossil record, and it's not something you can really prove in the fossil record. So if anything, that's kind of a fanciful or potential interpretation. Though it's still a cool interpretation. I still think it's possible, because I think we often underestimate the ability for dinosaurs to cooperate with each other. Because even look at crocodiles and Komodo dragons, they hunt together, even though it's more mobbing. And plus, these dinosaurs evolved for millions of years independently from these animals, so they could have developed their own social groups and things like that on their own, which we just don't have evidence for, because social behavior doesn't really preserve unless you have like tracks or things like that. So yeah, it's still very much possible, but it's something you can't really prove. It's kind of a known unknown, you could say. But there is possible interpretation that they may have just died together, and it just happens to be Mapusaurus at different ages together just by coincidence. But really, really cool. So Carcharodontosaurus is in the group Carcharodontosauridae, so it's related to other animals such as Giganotosaurus, and least close, it's in its own kind of group, subfamily, Gigantosaurinine. So that includes Giganotosaurus, Meraxes, and also Tyrannotitan. So it is a Carcharodontosaurid, but it's more closely related to those other South American giant Carcharodontosaurids like Tyrannotitan, Giganotosaurus. Also Megaraxes, which I'll mention. So what's really, really cool is the environment it lived in as well. The Hinsel Formation is thought to be quite arid with some seasonal streams and things like that. The age of formation is about 97 to 93 million years ago. And while the dinosaur record is sparse here, we have some pretty famous dinosaurs. We know that Mapusaurus lived with the giant Argentinosaurus, which was one of, if not the largest sauropods of all time. It also lived with a couple other sauropods such as Tronosaurus and Carchalosauria. And there's another Carcharodontosaurid that I'm going to mention that was only described just last year, Megarexes gigas, which comes from the same formation, but it's come from much older rocks, so it's very unlikely that they live together. It could potentially be an ancestor or a close relative, because it's in that group. It is related to Giganotosaurus and Mapusaurus and things like that. And one really cool thing about Megaraxes is that it's pretty much been found with this larger raptor claw, you could say, which I like people adding it to other Carcharodontosaurids. I think it's really makes sense, because this large claw, even though people often compare them to dromaeosaurs, it's very likely that this may have acted much similar to the modern example of the red-legged Sarima, which is a type of ground-dwelling bird from South America, and they often use their large claw to less to like disembowel prey. They use it to like hold a carcass and allow them to dismember things. That's very likely how giant Carcharodontosaurs like Megaraxes would have used this kind of claw, and I think it really just gives it a really interesting interpretation. And they're all closely related. I don't see why they wouldn't, and I don't think we have any preserved feet from at least Giganotosaurus or Mapusaurus. But yeah, it's still really cool. And there are many other animals that lived with as well. There's also Scorpiovenator and Escalanica, which is both abelisaurs, so relatives of things like I can't even speak, Carnotaurus, things like that. But yeah, there's quite a few interesting dinosaurs, and there's lots of fossils of pollen to show what the formation was like. There was lots of ferns, gymnosperms, so like conifer trees, and there were even angiosperms, which are flowering plants, all sorts of different plants. And they're also quite rich in smaller animals. There was lots of gar and turtles and sphenodonts, which are basically the ancient relatives of Tuatara. Neosuchian crocodilians. Also, a wide variety of dinosaurs, which includes a few other interesting species, like Oviraptor, Lameosaurus, Squalicho, and of course Argentinosaurus, as I mentioned. But vertebrates are more commonly found in the lower or the more older part of the formation, but Megaraxes is found in that formation, but typically Mapusaurus is a little bit later, so Megaraxes is older than Mapusaurus. But yeah, really, really cool. I do love these guys. And if you guys noticed, because I'm a bit of a paleo documentary nut, and I know you guys are too, I decided to show you the Mapusaurus. They did add a couple skins. There's like a deciduous and carnivorous skin, so it's basically like a special skin that's like got like a brown and green variant. And they added Planet Dinosaur little variant, because I know people love Planet Dinosaur. It's kind of those run-of-the-mill like mid-documentaries. I know it's like a popular one. It's kind of midway between it's older, but I thought it was pretty good. It's one of the better ones. But yeah, I really do like this interpretation. Really, really big fan. So nice to see Mapusaurus returning into Jurassic World Evolution 2 from the first game. Yeah, really, really cool. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.